An alien prophet spoke. If you strike first, they'll never stop. He was right. 5 years after Earth's devastation, 7 human warships breach Voxen Prime's defenses. Admiral Petra Novak delivers her ultimatum directly to the stunned Grand Council. Surrender within 72 hours or face destruction. Unlike their attackers, humans offer one chance for peace, demonstrating both the power to annihilate and the wisdom to refrain. The Grand Council chamber of the Voxen Confederation hummed with nervous energy. 37 delegates, their exoskeletons gleaming under the prismatic lights that cascaded from the vaulted ceiling, chittered and gestured with multiple appendages. The architecture of the chamber itself seemed to pulse with life, responsive bioluminescent panels that shifted colors with the emotional tenor of the debate. Prophet Charles Zuth stood silently at the observation platform, his neural implants recording the psychological data of the assembly. The counselors called him Truth, partly in deference to his position, partly in mockery of his human name, and partly because of his unsettling habit of being right. Unlike the other prophets who relied on probability matrices and trend analysis, Truth's forecasts incorporated a deeply nuanced understanding of psychology across species. His human origin gave him a particular insight into the species now under discussion. The evidence is incontrovertible. Supreme Commander Vexlor's voice boomed across the chamber. Her primary appendages spread wide in a gesture of absolute certainty. The holographic display behind her showed Earth's rapidly advancing technology curve. Humanity will achieve faster-than-light capability within 20 cycles. Their history of aggression, coupled with their expansionist tendencies, leaves us with only one rational course of action. Truth watched as the military faction's members, nearly half the council, clicked their mandibles in approval. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun, his battle carapace scarred from numerous campaigns, rose to support Vexlor. We have monitored their development for over 300 cycles, Zaraktun rasped. From nuclear weapons to their first faltering steps beyond their solar system, humans have consistently chosen conflict over cooperation. Their entertainment glorifies conquest. Their resources are dwindling. And now, they stand at the threshold of discovering our existence. Science Director Madhu Krin, one of the few counselors who regularly sought Truth's counsel in private, raised a slender appendage. But aggression during development is not necessarily predictive of interstellar behavior. The Trellis species were brutal to each other until achieving unity during their spatial expansion. The Trellis, Zaraktun countered, did not develop planet-killing weapons before achieving unity. Truth noted the shifting colors in the chamber walls, predominantly red and amber now, reflecting anxiety and aggression. He glanced at his fellow prophet, Troll Zuth, no relation despite the similar name, whose bitterness was evident in the tight configuration of his exoskeletal plates. Troll had long since given up trying to moderate council decisions, preferring to simply record failures for later study. Grand Arbiter Quenpal, whose enormous ceremonial headdress marked her status as final adjudicator, gestured for silence. We will now hear the formal proposal from Supreme Commander Vexlor. The chamber stilled, even the walls dimmed to a neutral blue. Vexlor approached the central platform, her exoskeleton clicking against the polished floor. I propose immediate and overwhelming preemptive action, she said, each word precisely measured. A coordinated strike against Earth's major population centers, military installations, and technological hubs. We leave nothing to chance, nothing that could evolve into a future threat. We have the capability to eliminate this problem before it threatens our existence. The walls pulsed with amber light as counselors reacted. Truth felt the implant at the base of his skull warm slightly. The neural network was registering the spike in emotional data. The prophet will now present counter-argument, Grand Arbiter Quenpal announced, barely hiding her impatience. Truth was a procedural necessity, nothing more. Truth stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. His human frame seemed small against the towering exoskeletons around him. "Honorable counselors," he began, "I have studied human history more extensively than anyone in this chamber. I've analyzed every major conflict in their recorded time. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that a preemptive strike will not eliminate the threat. It will guarantee it." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Truth continued, his voice steady. "Humans possess what I call retributive persistence. When attacked, particularly in a way they perceive as unjust, they do not surrender. They do not forget. They adapt. They hide. They plan. And they return, generation after generation if necessary." He gestured to the holographic display, replacing Vexlor's technology curve with historical images from Earth's wars. The small island nation of Japan attacked a larger nation called the United States without warning. The response was nuclear devastation. The terrorist organization Al-Qaeda struck American cities. The response was a 20-year war. Throughout human history, surprise attacks meant to decapitate enemies have instead galvanized them. Fleet Admiral Zaraktan clicked his mandibles dismissively. "These are internal squabbles between human factions. We are vastly technologically superior." "And that," Truth countered, "is precisely why a surviving population would never stop seeking vengeance. The Voxen would become humanity's eternal enemy, their bogeyman, their devil, their reason to develop technologies we cannot predict." Laughter, that peculiar chittering sound that Truth had learned to recognize as Voxen amusement, rippled through the chamber. Even the walls seemed to pulse with mocking purple light. "The Prophet suggests," Supreme Commander Vexlor said, barely containing her derision, "that we should fear a species that cannot yet leave its own solar system." "I suggest," Truth replied, his voice now quiet but firm, "that you should fear creating an enemy that will never stop coming for you, no matter the cost. Strike first, and I promise you this, they will never stop." Grand Arbiter Quen Pal raised her primary appendages. "The Council will now vote on the proposal for preemptive action against Earth." Truth watched as the votes appeared on the holographic display. The debate had swayed few minds. The final tally glowed ominously. 19 for the strike, 18 against. "By the narrowest of margins," Quen Pal announced. "The Council approves preemptive action. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun will oversee the operation. May wisdom guide our path." Truth felt a cold emptiness settle in his stomach. The walls of the chamber pulsed a satisfied deep blue as the Council adjourned. But to him, they might as well have been blood red. The Voxen flagship, Eternal Dominance, exited jump space 50,000 kilometers from Earth, leading a fleet of 17 warships. From his observation post on the command deck, Truth watched in silent horror as the tactical display showed the first wave of kinetic bombardment rods entering Earth's atmosphere. The weapons were simple in concept but devastating in execution. Tungsten rods accelerated to near relativistic speeds, carrying energy equivalent to small nuclear devices, but without the radiation. They struck with pinpoint precision, targeting military installations first. Earth's defenses responded with admirable but futile coordination. Missile batteries, energy weapons, and hastily launched interceptors managed to destroy perhaps 5% of the incoming ordnance. "Second wave deploying," announced the weapons officer, her exoskeleton gleaming with pride. The second wave targeted communication and transportation hubs, major airports, seaports, railway nexuses, and satellite uplink facilities disappeared in blossoming explosions, visible even from orbit. "Primitive," murmured Fleet Admiral Zaraktun, who had personally taken command of the operation. "They still rely on physical infrastructure for most communications." The third wave targeted population centers. Truth closed his eyes, but could not shut out the tactical data feeding directly to his neural implants. New York, Shanghai, Lagos, Mumbai, Tokyo. One by one, humanity's greatest cities burned. "Sir," one of the sensor operators called out, "we're detecting multiple launches from hardened silos in the northern hemisphere." Truth opened his eyes. "Intercontinental ballistic missiles," he said quietly. "They're last resort weapons." Zaraktun clicked dismissively. "Laughable. Point defenses. Eliminate those primitives." The Voxan fleet's energy weapons lashed out, detonating the nuclear-tipped missiles long before they could reach escape velocity. But Truth noted something the others missed. Several smaller launches amid the larger ones, barely registering on sensors. "They're trying to preserve something of themselves," he murmured. "Seed ships, knowledge repositories. They're already thinking about survival and recovery." "Irrelevant," Zaraktun replied. "They cannot escape the solar system." The bombardment continued for 26 hours. When it was complete, Earth's major military and industrial capacity had been reduced to smoldering ruins. An estimated 70% of the human population was dead, or would die from the collapse of infrastructure. A regrettable but necessary action, Supreme Commander Vexlor announced in her report to the Grand Council 3 days later. Occupation forces are being deployed to ensure no resurgence of dangerous technology. The threat has been neutralized. Truth, standing at his usual observation post, said nothing. He had already submitted his request for research leave, a formality that would begin his exile from Voxan Prime. His implants recorded the Council's satisfaction, their relief at having eliminated a potential threat without a single Voxan casualty. But as he packed his few possessions that evening, Truth felt only a growing sense of dread. His quarters, sparse by Voxan standards but luxurious by human ones, had been his home for over 40 cycles. Now they felt like a prison he was escaping, only to enter a larger one. Troll Zuth appeared at his door, mandibles clicking softly in the Voxan equivalent of a knowing smile. "You're leaving at the moment of victory," Troll observed. "One might think you doubt the Council's wisdom." "One might," Truth agreed, securing his neural archive, decades of psychological data too valuable to leave behind. "Where will you go? Back to the remains of your homeworld?" Truth shook his head. "The research vessel Ocular Witness. I've been granted permission to establish observation posts to monitor the human remnant population." "Ah," Troll's mandibles clicked again. "So you can document how wrong you were when they meekly accept their new status." "Something like that." Truth established his first observation post in Earth orbit, carefully hidden among debris from destroyed satellites. The second he placed on the far side of the Moon, and the third on Mars, disguised as a geological research station. The Voxan occupiers, confident in their complete victory, paid little attention to his activities. From these vantage points, he watched and recorded as humanity began to adapt to its new reality. The survivors congregated in the less damaged regions. Parts of Africa, South America, and Australia had been considered lower priorities in the bombardment. Small communities formed around surviving infrastructure, agricultural regions, and natural resources. The Voxan occupation forces established bases primarily in the Northern Hemisphere, focusing on preventing technological redevelopment. They were particularly vigilant about destroying any computer or communication technology they discovered. 6 months after the bombardment, Truth recorded the first act of resistance. A small Voxan patrol near the ruins of Cape Town disappeared. The Occupation Command assumed they had fallen victim to natural hazards or equipment failure. 2 weeks later, another patrol vanished near Buenos Aires. Truth enhanced sensor footage from a high-altitude drone and found what the occupation forces missed: the brief electromagnetic signature of Voxan communication devices being activated in unusual patterns. Someone was studying how they worked. 3 months later, a supply convoy transporting equipment from a Voxan landing zone in North America to a new base under construction was attacked. The ambushers struck with surprising coordination, disabling the convoy's communications before overrunning the guards. They took weapons, technology, and supplies before melting away into the surrounding forests. From his hidden observation post on Mars, Truth intercepted Voxan communications about the incident. Isolated primitive resistance was Fleet Admiral Zaraktun's assessment. Desperate survivors with nothing to lose. Increase patrol density in that sector and execute any humans found with Voxan technology. Truth shook his head. They still didn't understand. He continued monitoring, documenting the steady increase in resistance activities. The pattern was becoming clear. The human survivors were specifically targeting Voxan technology, studying it, reverse engineering it. Each attack seemed more sophisticated than the last. 18 months after the bombardment, Truth detected something that sent a chill through his body. A small spacecraft, cobbled together from salvaged Voxan components and human materials, launched from a hidden facility in the Andes Mountains. It used a brief burn to reach escape velocity, then went dark, presumably hiding among the debris in Earth orbit. He sent an encrypted message to Science Director Madhu Krin, the only council member who might listen. The pattern has begun. First study, then adaptation, then pursuit. I warned you. Madhu Krin's response came 2 days later. Isolated incident. Supreme Commander maintains confidence in containment strategy. By the end of the second year, the isolated incidents had become a pattern impossible to ignore. Small bands of human resistance fighters, wearing improvised armor, crafted from salvaged Voxan, exoskeletal materials, staged hit-and-run attacks on occupation bases. They employed hybrid weapons that combined Voxan energy technology with human design principles. The occupation forces responded with increased brutality, leveling suspected human settlements and establishing wider exclusion zones around their bases. It only seemed to accelerate the resistance. Then came the first strike beyond Earth. A Voxan mining outpost on Ceres went dark. Investigation found the facility destroyed, its technology stripped. A crude message had been burned into the rock face nearby. Remember Earth. 3 weeks later, a communication relay near Jupiter was sabotaged. 2 months after that, a small research station on Titan was attacked, its personnel killed, its data cores stolen. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun sent reinforcements to all off-Earth installations and dispatched hunter-killer drones to patrol the space between planets. These animals will be contained, he declared in a message to the Grand Council. Their primitive anger makes them predictable. Truth watched from his Mars observation post as the hunter-killer drones swept past, oblivious to his presence. He had been monitoring unusual energy signatures in the asteroid belt for weeks, signs of small vessels using modified Voxan drive systems to move between hiding places. Not primitive, he murmured to himself. Adaptive. The human guerrillas in space had learned to mask their engine signatures, developed stealth systems using materials harvested from Voxan technology, and established hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt. They were studying, learning, preparing. 3 years after the bombardment, the first jump-capable human vessel was detected. A small craft, clearly built from salvaged and reverse-engineered Voxan technology, appeared without warning near a Voxan outpost in the Kuiper Belt. It launched a devastating attack, destroying the outpost before any distress call could be sent, then disappeared, jumping away using stolen Voxan technology. The Grand Council called an emergency session. Truth was summoned back to Voxan Prime, his exile temporarily suspended. This is impossible, Supreme Commander Vexlor insisted as the council chamber walls pulsed anxious yellow. They cannot have developed jump technology so quickly. They didn't develop it, Truth replied calmly. They stole it. They studied it. They improved it. Improved it. Science Director Madhu Krin's appendages trembled slightly. What do you mean? The energy signature from the human jump vessel showed modifications to our standard configurations. They've found ways to mask the pre-jump energy buildup that our sensors normally detect. That's how they approached the Kuiper Belt outpost undetected. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun's battle carapace clicked as he shifted uncomfortably. Isolated technological theft. We will increase security protocols. It's too late for that, Truth interrupted. The pattern is accelerating. You struck first, and now they will never stop. Just as I warned. Over the next 6 months, attacks on Voxen outposts throughout the solar system increased in frequency and effectiveness. Small human vessels using modified jump drives would appear without warning, strike with devastating precision, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The Voxen occupation forces on Earth found themselves under siege. Human resistance fighters, now equipped with reverse-engineered Voxen weapons and armor, attacked in coordinated assaults that suggested a global communication network the occupiers couldn't detect. Truth, restored to his advisory position, but still distrusted by most of the Council, presented his analysis. They're using a decentralized communication system, possibly based on quantum entanglement principles they've adapted from our technology. Each cell operates independently, but with shared strategic goals. And what would those goals be, Prophet? Grand Arbiter Quenpal asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. Survival, revenge, and eventually to ensure we can never threaten them again. The council chamber walls pulsed with deep red anxiety as the members absorbed this assessment. 4 years and 3 months after the bombardment of Earth, the human counteroffensive began in earnest. 4 Voxen star systems came under simultaneous attack, including Nexus 7, a major military hub, just 2 jump points from Voxen Prime. The attacks were not random strikes but carefully planned operations. Human vessels, larger now, clearly purpose-built warships incorporating both Voxen and human design elements, targeted specific military installations, communication arrays, and jump point defenses. The Voxen military, which had grown complacent in its technological superiority, found itself outmaneuvered by human vessels that could jump with greater precision and stealth. While Voxen ships required specific coordinates and extensive calculations for each jump, the human vessels seemed capable of making micro-jumps within star systems, appearing, firing, and disappearing before defenses could target them. They've weaponized the jump drive itself, Science Director Madhu Krin reported to the stunned council. They're using principles we considered too unstable for practical application. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun, his battle carapace now bearing fresh scars from a narrowly escaped ambush, could no longer dismiss the threat. We must commit our full military reserves. Planetary defense systems must be brought to maximum readiness. But it was already too late. 5 years after the bombardment of Earth, a fleet of 7 human warships appeared in the Voxen Prime system. They had jumped past the outer defense perimeter, past the minefields and sensor arrays, and emerged less than 1 light minute from the homeworld. Before the orbital defense platforms could respond, the human vessels launched devastating strikes against military installations. They deliberately avoided civilian targets, a fact that Truth noted with both relief and grim vindication. The largest human warship, a massive construction that combined Voxen jump technology with distinctly human design aesthetics, launched landing craft. Strike teams of human soldiers in advanced combat armor breached the Grand Council's defensive perimeter, fighting their way through layers of security to reach the council chamber itself. Truth watched from his observation platform as the chamber's walls pulsed chaotic patterns of fear, anger, and disbelief. Supreme Commander Vexlor and Fleet Admiral Zaraktun organized the remaining guards into a defensive formation around the council members. Then, a holographic projection appeared in the center of the chamber. A human woman, her face bearing burn scars that traced patterns across her left cheek and eye. She wore a uniform of black and silver, with insignia that Truth recognized as indicating high rank. "I am Admiral Petra Novak of the Earth Defense Force," she announced. Her voice translated perfectly into Voxen speech patterns. "Your defensive capabilities have been neutralized. Your military command structure is compromised. We now control your orbital approach vectors." The council chamber fell silent. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath, frozen in patterns of shock. I addressed the Voxan Grand Council directly. Admiral Novak continued. You have 72 hours to agree to our terms, or we will demonstrate that your homeworld is as vulnerable as ours was. Unlike you, we will offer this one chance for peaceful resolution. Grand Arbiter. Quenpal stepped forward, her ceremonial headdress quivering slightly. What are your terms, human? Complete withdrawal of all Voxan forces from Earth and the Sol system. Return of all human prisoners. Reparations for the destruction inflicted upon our world. A demilitarized zone extending 3 jump points in all directions from Sol. And the surrender of those who ordered the unprovoked genocide of our people to face justice under human law. The council erupted in chittering protests. Supreme Commander Vexlor stepped toward the hologram, her exoskeleton bristling with rage. You dare to dictate terms? Your species would be extinct if we had been thorough enough in our cleansing. We should have— Commander, Truth interrupted, his voice cutting through the chaos. They have demonstrated the capability to destroy this world as thoroughly as we destroyed theirs. Perhaps now is the time for diplomacy, rather than threats. Admiral Novak's holographic gaze shifted to Truth. You are the one they call prophet? The one who warned them? Truth nodded. I am. Your warning was correct. We will never stop. Not until we are secure. Not until justice is served. But we do not seek extinction. Unlike your leaders, we understand that genocide creates only endless cycles of revenge. The chamber walls pulsed with confused patterns as council members struggled to process this unexpected restraint. 72 hours, Admiral Novak repeated. We await your answer. Her hologram vanished. The emergency council session that followed lasted 27 hours. Factions formed and reformed as the reality of their situation became clear. The human forces controlled key orbital positions. More human fleets had been detected at nearby jump points. The Voxan military, long accustomed to technological superiority, had been outmaneuvered by an enemy they had gravely underestimated. Truth, now elevated to senior advisor, presented his analysis. The humans could have destroyed our major cities as we destroyed theirs. They chose not to. This suggests their primary goal is security, not revenge, though justice for the attack remains a non-negotiable demand. Supreme Commander Vexlor, her authority now openly questioned, argued for continued resistance. We cannot surrender to primitives. Our reserves, our outer colonies, we can rebuild, counterattack. And they will adapt again. Truth countered, the pattern is clear. Each time we have escalated, they have responded with greater innovation and determination. This cycle ends only with mutual destruction or negotiated peace. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun, surprisingly, supported Truth. I have fought many species across many star systems, the scarred veteran said quietly. None have shown the adaptive capacity of these humans. None have turned our own technology against us so effectively. We struck to prevent a threat, and in doing so, created a greater one. The final vote was 21-16 in favor of accepting the human terms. Grand Arbiter Quenpal, her ceremonial authority now a hollow formality, announced the decision with palpable bitterness. Truth was appointed to the negotiation team, along with Science Director Madhu Krin and 3 other counselors, known for their moderate views. Supreme Commander Vexlor and several of her strongest supporters were placed under house arrest, a concession to the human demand for accountability. The first face-to-face negotiations took place at a battered Earth spaceport that had been rebuilt from the ruins of what was once called Kennedy Space Center. Admiral Petra Novak led the human delegation, her burn scars even more prominent in person than they had been in holographic form. These, she said, gesturing to her scars as she noticed Truth studying them, are my reminder of the day your kinetic rods fell on my hometown. I was one of the lucky ones. Truth nodded solemnly. There is no adequate apology for what was done to your world. I can only say that I stand ready to help build a different future. The negotiations were tense but productive. The humans, despite their justified anger, proved pragmatic. They demanded security guarantees, technology transfers, and reparations, but stopped short of the punitive measures many Voxen had feared. "We want to ensure this never happens again," Admiral Novak explained during one difficult session. "That requires your cooperation, not your destruction." The withdrawal of Voxen forces from Earth began immediately, to be completed within one standard cycle. A demilitarized zone was established, extending 3 jump points from Sol in all directions. Joint monitoring stations would verify compliance. The most contentious issue remained accountability. The humans insisted that those who had ordered the bombardment face justice. The Voxen Council, while willing to sacrifice Vexlor and a few others as scapegoats, resisted surrendering their citizens to human courts. The compromise, brokered largely through Truth's persistent efforts, established a joint tribunal with judges from both species, operating under principles of justice acceptable to both cultures. 5 years after the human counteroffensive reached Voxen Prime, a new equilibrium had been established. The joint monitoring station at the solar boundary represented the most visible symbol of this uneasy peace. A massive structure where human and Voxen scientists and diplomats worked side by side. Truth, now serving as senior cultural liaison, had established his permanent residence at the station. His neural implants had been modified, with his consent, to allow direct interface with human communication systems, making him a literal bridge between species. The cultural exchange programs had begun cautiously, but gained momentum as mutual benefits became apparent. Human adaptability and innovation complemented Voxen thoroughness and long-term planning. Trade agreements had been established, focusing initially on non-military technologies. The trial of the Voxen War Council members had concluded the previous year. Supreme Commander Vexlor and 3 others had been found guilty of crimes against sentient beings and sentenced to life imprisonment. Fleet Admiral Zaraktun, whose testimony had been crucial in establishing the chain of command, received a more lenient sentence. Truth stood at the observation deck of the joint monitoring station, watching a small ceremony taking place in the memorial garden. A human child, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, carefully placed a small stone at the base of a monument listing the names of destroyed Earth cities. Admiral Novak, now serving as diplomatic coordinator, stepped up beside him. "My granddaughter," she explained. "Born after the war. The first generation that will grow up knowing both our species." Truth nodded. "What did she say as she placed the stone?" My audio pickup couldn't quite catch it. "An old saying we've adapted for the memorial. We remember, so we aren't the bad ones. It's part of our education now, teaching children about what happened, but also about the danger of preemptive fear." "A wise lesson," Truth said quietly. "One the council should have heeded." They stood in companionable silence, watching as more children, both human and, remarkably, a few young Voxen from the diplomatic corps, placed stones at the memorial. "Do you ever wonder," Novak asked after a while, "what might have happened if the council had listened to you, if they had chosen contact instead of preemption?" Truth considered the question. "I've run the simulations many times. First contact would have been tense, certainly. Misunderstandings were inevitable, perhaps even limited conflicts. But not this. Not the death of billions and a blood debt that will echo for generations. And yet, here we are." Novak gestured to the children, "building something new from the ashes. Because in the end, you chose to be better than we were." Truth said, "You could have destroyed our world as thoroughly as we devastated yours. The capability was there, but you stopped." Novak's scarred face showed a complicated mix of emotions. "It was a close debate among our leadership. Many wanted exactly that, to reduce your cities to the same rubble as ours. but we recognized that would just continue the cycle. In the garden below, a young Voxen, its exoskeleton still soft and pearlescent with youth, placed a stone next to one left by a human child. The two younglings then touched appendages in a gesture of respect that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. "Understanding, not fear," Truth murmured. "That's the only path forward." "Difficult path," Novak acknowledged. "We still have extremists on both sides. Humans who want all Voxen dead. Voxen who believe humanity should have been exterminated when they had the chance. But they are the minority now." Truth noted. The station received over 2,000 applications for the next cultural exchange program, more than half from young Voxen who want to study on Earth. And nearly 3,000 humans have applied to study Voxen architectural bioengineering, Novak added. The integrated research teams are producing remarkable innovations. A small alert chimed from Novak's communication device. She checked it and sighed. "The Joint Security Council needs input on the latest border monitoring protocols. Duty calls." Truth nodded. "I'll join you shortly. I want to watch the ceremony conclude." As Novak departed, Truth turned his attention back to the memorial garden. The children had finished placing their stones and were now being led in a simple song, human and Voxen voices creating an unusual but not unpleasant harmony. His neural implants recorded the moment, adding it to the vast psychological database he had accumulated over decades. The pattern was clear, but different now. Not the spiral of retribution he had feared, but a cautious ascension towards something new. He knew better than most how fragile this peace remained. How many on both sides still harbored resentments that could flare into renewed conflict. The human phrase, retributive persistence, that he had coined all those years ago still applied. The memory of Earth's devastation would never fully fade from human consciousness. But against that persistent memory now stood another force, the stubborn, day-by-day work of those committed to building connections rather than severing them. The scientists sharing discoveries, the diplomats crafting agreements, the children placing stones side by side. Truth's implants registered a subtle shift in his own emotional patterns, a cautious optimism he had not permitted himself to feel in many years. He was under no illusion that the path ahead would be easy. Old fears and prejudices would resurface. New challenges would emerge. But watching the children in the garden, descendants of both victim and aggressor, he allowed himself to hope that understanding, not fear, might eventually bind these former enemies together. He had been right in his warning to the Council all those years ago. If you strike first, they'll never stop. The humans had indeed persisted beyond all Voxen expectations, turning defeat into an improbable victory. But he had been wrong about something too. The cycle of retribution could be broken, not through superior force or technological advantage, but through the harder, slower work of building trust, where once there had been only fear. As the memorial ceremony concluded, Truth made his way toward the council chambers. There was still much work to be done, many bridges yet to build. But for the first time in many years, he believed the work might actually succeed. The prophet had spoken, and this time, he hoped, both species would listen.